There we go. Afternoon all, it's Jim here at Tutor to You. Welcome to our latest GCSE Business live revision session, and it's going to be a gentle warm-up, a gentle stretch as we get ready for our first GCSE Business paper. And joining me, two familiar faces, we've got Susan in the middle and Mike on the right. Good afternoon.
Hello. Hello.
Afternoon, Jim. Afternoon, everyone.
And well, we've got loads of people joining us today in live chat. Just looking down the list, we've got Jack and Jenny and Arthur and Alice and loads of others. I think we're up to just short of 170 live with us at the minute, and more joining us. So the idea here is just to do some revision activities. Good way of just recapping some, not every topic, but a nice mix of topics, but also to spend a bit of time looking at some exam technique and application and various other things. So obviously we don't get a chance to cover it all, but a nice way just to get going. Chip in with a bit more business revision. Susan, what's the format for today? We've got sort of 5 or 6 different activities to work our way through.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at some multiple choice questions, calculations, and looking at case study, and then 9-mark questions. Brilliant
stuff. Well, I think what my plan is, we'll go through the activity. I'll take a step back and help on the slides. I know we've got Graham, who's like the VAR of our live chat today. He's in the live chat helping out, answering questions as we go. Please use the live chat to have a go with your answers, and questions are fine as well. I think what we might do is we have a couple of minutes at the end. We'll try to pick up on some of the questions that you've got about GCSE business. Try to address maybe a few of those at the end, if that's okay. Does that sound good, Mike? Susan, is that okay?
Sounds amazing, Jim.
Okay, let's make a start then. Let's go.
Okay, so we are going to start off with some multiple choice questions, because this is the type of question that you're going to see when you open your paper on Friday. So we're going to have a quick practice and give you some top tips to help you answer this type of question. So let's take a look at this first one. So in the chat window, what I'd like you to do is type in A, B, C or D, depending on which one you think is the correct answer. So the question is, which of the following are both examples of external growth? So A, developing new products and opening new stores. B, mergers and takeovers. C, developing new products and mergers. Or D, expanding through e-commerce and takeovers. So this topic area is on paper 1 for AQA, but for Edexcel, it'll appear in paper 2. So just bear that in mind. And in Edexcel, it's also called inorganic growth in the specification. So be prepared for that name of that the topic to be called inorganic growth as well as external growth. We've got so many answers coming in the chat window, and everyone's got the right answers so I can see. And it's B, mergers and takeovers. So well done. So a takeover, remember, is when a business buys a controlling interest in another business. And a merger is when 2 or more firms join together to make a new firm. So developing new products and expanding through e-commerce are examples of organic growth or internal growth. So well done, everybody. So let's take a look at question 2. So which of the following is the correct formula to calculate the closing balance in a cash flow forecast? So is it A, opening balance minus net cash flow? B, total cash inflows minus total cash outflows? C, opening balance plus net cash flow? Or D, total cash inflows plus total cash outflows plus net cash flow? So which letter you think corresponds to the right answer, type that into the chat window. So cash flow forecast in paper 1 for Edexcel, paper 2 for AQA, but it's included in the quantitative skills section of the advanced information as well as the main body. So you need to know the formulae for all the different types of calculations that can be included in a cash flow forecast. Lots of answers coming in, a mixture of answers actually. So closing balance, let's take a look at the answer, and it is, Jim, it's C. So the opening balance plus the net cash flow will give you the closing balance for the period that the cash flow forecast relates to, so normally each month. And it's how much money the business believes it will have left at the end of that period. And the closing balance will always be the opening balance for the next month. So just bear that in mind, because if you're asked to complete a cash flow forecast table in the exam, and you can't remember a formulae, if you look ahead and there's, say, you've got to fill in the figures for January, but February, March and April are there, and you can't remember the formulae, as I said, you might be able to look at the next month or the month after to see how those figures are derived, and then you can use that formulae to help you complete that calculation. Brilliant. So let's take a look at question 3. Which of the following is an objective that a new partnership may set? So is it A, survival, B, international growth, C, profit maximisation, or D, increasing dividend payments to shareholders? So read the question carefully. Partnerships in paper 1 on Friday. So look at all the bits, the stem, the hooks in that question. So a new partnership may set which objective? Lots of answers coming in again, and everyone's got the right answer this time. So well done. It is survival. So international growth, profit maximisation, linked to larger businesses, more established businesses, and increasing dividend payments to shareholders. That shareholders only exist in private or public limited companies, and therefore they don't exist in a new partnership. So that can't possibly be D. But A, a new partnership, so that word new is really important in this question, would be focusing on survival or something like break even. Now, a common error in Edexcel papers or answers linked to objectives is survival is a financial aim or objective, not a non-financial aim or objective. So if you're an Edexcel student, that's worth bearing in mind. So let's have a look at the last multiple choice question. So which of the following is an example of a fixed cost? So A, packaging, B, stock, C, salaries, or D, commission. So a fixed cost. AQA and Edexcel will see possibly this on Friday. So remember, for AQA, fixed cost comes under the section business planning 3.1.6. So fixed costs, variable costs, a common question that is asked in exams. Lots of answers coming in. Alfie, Matilde, Rosie, all got the correct answer. And the answer is C. So salaries are a fixed cost. They don't change according to how many units the business makes or sells. Other examples of fixed costs include rent and insurance. And the other three are examples of variable costs. So well done, everybody, if you got those correct. So we'll just take a look at some exam gold linked to multiple choice questions. Now, hopefully you recognise the fact that multiple choice questions are computer marked. So there isn't a person marking these multiple choice questions. So therefore, it's really important that you answer the multiple choice questions in the correct way. So if you're AQA, you need to shade in the circle. Edexcel, you need to put a cross in the appropriate box. You'll be writing in black pen. So if you change your mind, make sure you know how to amend your answer. That is absolutely key. So if you're AQA and you've coloured in the little circle and you change your mind, you need to put a cross through that and then circle or fill in the circle for the answer that you believe now is the correct answer. For Edexcel, you need to put a cross through the line, a line through the cross that you've actually made if you've chosen the wrong answer again or the answer that you think is incorrect. Really important because you won't be able to rub out your answers. If you start putting ticks or scribbles, the computer might not be able to recognise your answer and you might not be given the mark. So in the 2019 examiners reports, it actually stated that some students left multiple choice questions blank. It's really, really important to guess if you're unsure. That might be that students thought they'll come back to a question later on in the exam paper and then they ran out of time. Don't use that tactic. Always guess as you read the multiple choice question, have a go at it, and then put maybe an asterisk next to that question and come back to it if you do have a few seconds left at the end of the exam paper. Edexcel students will see multiple choice questions which require one answer and others that require two. And it's worth remembering if you're an Edexcel student, you won't lose both marks if one answer is correct and the other is incorrect. It's really important that if you are asked for two answers, and that only appears for Edexcel students, not AQA, that you do select two answers. If you get one wrong, you won't lose both marks. So it's just worth remembering that when you're answering those MCQs. You need to whiz through those MCQs to make sure you've got enough time to answer those big marked questions at the end of the paper. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Mike now. He's going to talk you through some calculation questions.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, we're going to look at a couple of really key topics here, a couple of 60-second challenges for you. We're going to start off looking at break-even, really fundamental topic. So using the break-even chart or break-even diagram on the screen, you're going to calculate the margin of safety if the business is operating at 230 units. You need to calculate the value of fixed costs, and you need to calculate the profit or loss the business would make if it was operating at 100 units. So 3 things to do. Put your answers in the chat window, please. Great to see so many answers coming in on the multiple choice there. Answers in the chat window. 60 seconds. Here we go. Thank you for all the answers that we've had through so far. Far too many to comment on. I'm glad the music was appreciated, though. There's a lot of thought and effort goes into that. So 3 answers we're looking for. If you can do all 3 of those in 60 seconds, you're doing pretty well. So don't be alarmed if you haven't got all 3 of them. Let's have a look at the answers. So the margin of safety, first of all, if the business is operating at 230 units, well, as Graham's put in the chat window there, the formula to calculate margin of safety is actual output minus break-even output. The actual output is given to us in the question if the business is operating at 230 units, and the break-even output we can get from the break-even chart. If we look at the break-even point where total revenue and total costs intersect, and then we trace that down to the horizontal axis, we see break-even output is 150 units. So the margin of safety, therefore, is 230 minus 150, which is 80 units. Really well done if you got that right. Fixed costs we can get from reading off the graph, reading off the break-even chart. We understand that total costs are fixed costs plus variable costs. We know that fixed costs don't change with output, and so fixed cost is still payable when output is 0. So if we look at the number of units sold, the horizontal axis, 0 there, and trace that up, we can see that at 0 units sold, total costs are 600. That must be the fixed costs. There's variable costs at 0 units sold will be 0. So that's fixed costs at £600. Well done if you got that right. And then finally, at 100 units, the profit or loss. Well, we've already established that the break-even output is 150 units. So we should realize that at 100 units, the business will be losing money. So total costs will be greater than total revenue. So we're going to have a minus figure. Well, if we read off 100 units, we trace up to the total revenue line, and then across to the vertical axis, we can see that total revenue at 100 units is £600. And if we carry up to the total cost line, we can see that's £800 at 100 units. So 600 minus 800 is minus 200. I saw several correct answers here, which is really good. Lots of people saying, maybe the maths is a struggle or is a challenge. Really, the figures here are relatively simple, and you can use a calculator as well. The important thing to learn is the formula. Can you also note, please, 100 units, it's a loss, and that's signified as minus £200. The minus is shown in brackets. Negative figures are shown in brackets. And I saw some correct answers there in the chat window. Well done. Let's look at another 60-second challenge then. Slightly different topic this time. Business has provided the following financial information that relates to last year. Using the information in the table, calculate the level of profit the business made last year. Selling price per unit is £25. Revenue is £650,000. Variable cost per unit is £10. Fixed costs are £300,000. Calculate the level of profit the business made last year. Answers in the chat window, please. Here's 60 seconds. Once again, several stages to this calculation. So if you're not able to do it in 60 seconds, don't be alarmed. If you're able to do that in an exam and get it right in 60 seconds, you're doing very well. The correct answer, as so many people have identified, is 90,000. It's £90,000 to be precise, and it's important to understand the units you're dealing with. In this case, it's an amount of money. It's therefore £90,000. Please make sure that you're clear on that. If we're talking about break-even output, of course, it's a number of units. So just try to be clear. We start with the formula again. profit is revenue minus total costs. So profit is revenue minus total costs. We're actually given the revenue, but we need to work out the number of units sold in order that we can work out total variable costs. So the revenue divided by the selling price per unit, 650,000 divided by 25 will give us the number of units sold. We can then multiply that by the variable cost per unit to get the total variable costs. Remember that total costs are fixed costs plus variable costs. So we add the variable costs of 260,000 to the fixed cost of 300,000 and we get 560. And then it's a case of deducting those total costs from the revenue. 650,000 minus 560,000 gives an answer of £90,000. Well done if you got that right, and lots of you did. Let's look at some exam gold when we're dealing with numerical or quantitative skills questions. I've said to you in both of those, start with the formula. If you learn the formula, then you'll be able to tackle any of these questions. So write the formula out in words. It may help you to work out the answer correctly. It's a good step to go through. Always show your workings. The reason for that is that even if you get the final answer wrong, you may be able to get some credit. So show your workings. It also reduces the chance of you making a mistake. So show your workings on the paper. Check the column headings in any tables. Ensure you're working in the right values. So the figures in the table may be simplified. In the column heading, it may say dealing with thousands of pounds, for example. So check the column headings. And always reread the question. If the question asks you to give the answer to 2 decimal places, please make sure you do so. You should always write your final answer on the answer line as well. There will be an answer line, write your final answer there, so there's no doubt about what your final answer is. Very well done with the 60-second challenge. Susan, I'll hand back to you for some 9-mark questions.
Thank you, Mike. So we are going to be looking at a case study and we're going to be linking it to a 9-mark question. So I'm going to read through the case study with you. So on Friday, you'll be presented with 2 different case studies in your paper, one in section B and one in section C. If you're an AQA student, your case study will be spread across different pages in your paper. So just be prepared for that. For Edexcel, it will all be contained on one page. Now, when students read case studies, often they just highlight or underline everything or near enough everything in the case study. And what we recommend that you do is if you annotate or just make a few notes in the margin or around key parts of the context or the case study, it will help you when you're referring back to the case study, when you're writing your answers, to use a variety or a mixture of context in your responses, because that is what the examiner is looking for you to do. In your answers, the examiner wants to see that you understand the situation that the firm is facing. So as you read through a case study, you can underline or highlight, but also annotate. And then when you use different parts of the case study in your answers, you can tick that off, and that will help you to include a mixture in your response. So let's have a look at this together. So for many years, Anne and Carol have owned and run a successful personal training business. So it's a successful business and it's established. It's been running for a number of years. So you should be picking up on that, called PT Fitness. Customers can access Anne and Carol's services online, where one-to-one sessions are available, or by attending group training sessions, which are held in local parks and outdoor areas. So they don't have a property that customers come to at present. Due to increasing demand, so we can see that the business is doing well, it's successful, and there's increased demand. So more and more customers want to use their services. And to overcome the issues of poor weather. So there's an external factor there that's affecting their business as it stands at the moment. Anne and Carol have decided to rent a small building, which they will plan to convert into a gym. They'll be spacing the building for 2 fitness rooms, showers, and a changing area. To keep expenditure low or to keep costs down, so that's important. So that's an important target. The gym will have a limited selection of machines. In total, this decision will cost the couple £100,000. So if you see any figures in a case study, they are significant. So always highlight them, make a note of them, and they're there for a reason. So try and use that or incorporate the figures into a response. Anne and Carol have personal savings of 75,000, but will need to raise the remainder, so that's 25,000 of the finance from external sources. So that's from outside of the business. At present, interest rates are forecast to fall. So if you see some information like that about interest rates and the business is short of cash, that's there for a reason, because the owners might be thinking about getting a bank loan. Interest rates are forecast to fall, therefore interest repayments will be lower. Anne and Carol are now considering whether to change their business ownership from a partnership to a private limited company and invite their friend, so they know this person, John, a former accountant, to buy shares in the business. So it's significant what he does previously. So he's former means he used to be an accountant. John has £25,000 worth of savings that he would be able to invest. Despite having no experience of working in this market, John has told Anne and Carol that he would like to be fully involved in the running of the business, as he has been recently made redundant. So that means he's lost his job and therefore got spare time on his hands. So we're going to be looking at this question: should Anne and Carol change their business ownership so that we know that they were a partnership to a private limited company? So it's a 9-mark question. All 9-mark questions will require a decision to be made. So you need to include that in your judgment, but you need to be looking at a balanced analytical paragraphs beforehand. Now, the structure of this question isn't in any particular exam board type of structure. So for Edexcel, you would see 2 bullet points on Friday linked to a 9-mark question. AQA would see a similar question to this, but the command word would be recommend or advise, whereas Edexcel, it would be justify. But because we've got different exam boards on this session, that's why it's an open question like this. So I'm going to hand over to Mike, who's going to talk to you about the analytical paragraphs.
Brilliant. Thank you, Susan. So we're looking to build 2 analytical paragraphs. For Edexcel students, you're looking precisely for 5 interconnected strands across those 2 paragraphs. So 5 interconnected strands across the 2 paragraphs for Edexcel students. For AQA, it's less prescriptive. You're looking for full analysis, which means fully developing your arguments, fully developing your points. One of our arguments here is going to be a reason to change to a private limited company. So change from a partnership to a private limited company. That's one of our paragraphs. Let's think about what point or points we could raise here. So try and think, please, of one reason why changing to a private limited company may be a good idea for Anne and Carol. You can put your answer in the chat window. I'm going to stress here, though, some of you have done this already, or started doing this already. It says a good idea for Anne and Carol, and it's important to remember that all 3 of your paragraphs, or all of your paragraphs in your 9-mark answers, need to include context. So you need reference to the context throughout your answer. So in the chat window, please, one reason why changing to a private limited company may be a good idea for Anne and Carol. So lots of similar answers coming through. A range of different points. What I'm looking for here, the best answers are going to have some reference to Anne and Carol, to the case study that Susan has just been through with you, to be able to think about that. So lots of people saying things like limited liability, some people saying less privacy. Not quite sure perhaps why that would be an advantage. Raising finance is listed there. Almost all of the answers I've seen so far in the chat window, though, could be relevant for any business changing from a partnership to a private limited company. What we're looking for here is something specific or explicit use of the case study. Let's have a look at an answer. This is not the only possible point you could make, but one reason why changing to a private limited company may be a good idea for Anne and Carol is John has £25,000 to invest in share capital in the new gym, which would not need to be paid back. So the money wouldn't need to be paid back. That would be generic. By saying John has £25,000 to invest in share capital in the new gym, which would not need to be paid back, we are relating the point to the context. We're linking the point to the context. So that's a great opening sentence. Of course, we would go on beyond this, as I said before, to look to develop some interconnected strands as using connectives to build analysis. Reminder, for Edexcel students, you're looking for 5 interconnected strands across 2 paragraphs. For AQA, you're looking for full analysis. So there is one side of the argument. We would develop that into a full paragraph, but now we need to look at the other side. We need to get some balance. We need to think about one reason why changing to a private limited company may not be a good idea for Anne and Carol. Please try to link your responses here to the case study. Okay, you can see our example for the reason to change on the screen. Try and link your reason not to the case study. A few seconds. Thanks for those we've got coming through. Yeah, Ebony, I like the way you're going with that. There's a little bit perhaps you could add that would really make that explicit. Let's have a look at our answer then. And again, this is not the only possible point, but this is just an example. So, and Ebony, this is the point you were hinting at. Notice here the green font in the answer. That's the application to context. So John wants to be fully involved in the business, which may lead to disagreements, as Carol and Anne have run the business successfully for many years. We could say here there may be disagreements, more owners, more disagreements, or more chance of disagreements. That would be generic. That would apply to any business. By saying John wants to be fully involved, that's come from the case study, and by saying there may be disagreements because Can and Arrow have run the business successfully for many years, is explicit and it's specific to this case. Again, we would look to build this into a paragraph. So we'd be looking to develop 2 to 3 interconnected strands in this paragraph to go alongside our previous one. For Edexcel, we'd be looking for those 5 interconnected strands. For AQA, full analysis. Okay, so the key bit here is trying to build points, link them to the case study so that it's applied to context, and build that analysis as you go. The next stage, of course, is evaluation. Susan, let me hand over to you for that bit.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm just going to work through a conclusion to this particular question, because an evaluation is often seen, or the conclusion, the final paragraph is often seen by students as an afterthought. So they write 1 sentence or 2 sentences because they think they've written 2 chunky paragraphs for the analysis and the evaluation isn't really that important. But what you need to remember is that there are 3 marks available for application, so that's linking your answer to the context. There are 3 marks available for analysis, so when Mike's been talking about those interconnected strands or full analysis, and there are also 3 marks available for evaluation, so there's an equal number of marks for each of the assessment objectives. So important to put enough emphasis on this final paragraph. And the conclusion is the paragraph that consolidates the analysis. So when you're writing your judgment, it allows evaluation to be shown. So for Edexcel, the exam board are looking for you, and AQA looking for you to write a balanced argument. So you need a for and a counter argument. That's very, very important. And then a conclusion at the end where you're going to make your decision. So let me run through this with you. So the first word's really important. Overall, I think. This should be the only place where you're using the words I think. If you've written in the first analytical paragraph, I think X, and then in the next paragraph, I think Y, and then in the conclusion, I think Z, there's 3 different judgments there, and therefore your judgment isn't clear. So you need to keep it nice and open in your analytical paragraphs. On one hand, it may be a good idea. On the other hand, it may not be a good idea. And then in the final paragraph, this is your judgment. I think that Anne and Carol should change their business ownership to a private limited company. So we're using the AGIM acronym here. So I'll talk through that with you. So you'll see AGIM, answer the question, justify, it depends upon, and the most important factor. So answer the question that is stated. It doesn't matter which way you go. So if your friends come out and say, oh, I said they shouldn't change, it doesn't matter. It's all about showing the skill of evaluation, supporting the judgment that you've made. Now, you need to base your judgment on the analysis plus additional information. So this phrase here in blue is really important to remember. Not only is this because John has a £25,000 to invest in the business, meaning there would be no need for the couple to take out a bank loan. So that's reference to the analysis earlier, but also because the owners would be protected by limited liability. And that's what lots of you are talking about in the chat window. This would be good if Anne and Carol decided to invest in more machinery for the gym. So I've linked the limited liability to the case study rather than just putting that in as a throwaway comment, and needed to borrow money from the bank in the future. Now, we had a disadvantage of getting John into the business as a private limited company. So I'm just going to reduce the argument down now. Even though John may want to be fully involved in the business, this may actually work out well for Anne and Carol, as the larger business would be more complicated to run, and John could take responsibility for certain areas of the firm, such as finance, as he was an accountant. So that's fully justified there. That's what you need to do. Embed your answer and your conclusion in the case study. Now, AQA is not so important to include a depends on factor, but for Edexcel, they really like you to include a depends on factor in these 9 and 12 mark questions. It lifts your evaluation. So what does your judgment depend upon? The decision depends upon how well the 3 work together. So even that word 3 shows some context there. So that's a depends on factor. Now, that's put a seed of doubt in my mind that the judgment is the correct one now. So what we do in the most important factor is we say, despite this, it's still the right decision. I still believe it's the right decision. So what we've got here, but as Anne and Carol are friends with John, they should know his personality and whether they are likely to get along. Ultimately, if there are arguments, Anne and Carol will be investing £75,000, which is more money than John, so they could always overrule him if they don't like his ideas. So that is an example of an evaluation. It is long, but if you can remember the AGIM acronym and follow that through with your judgment, overall, I think, support your judgment with analysis, which you've already written about, but some new evidence, put a depends on factor, but explain that depends on factor, and then the most important factor, you're going to smash that conclusion and get the 3 marks for that particular skill, especially if you include that context as well. So let's take a look at some exam gold or some last tips on 9 mark questions. These questions, why we focus on the 9 mark questions today is that they are worth 20% of the marks of your paper on Friday. So there's 2 9 mark questions. So you must plan. We're suggesting a 3-paragraph approach, and as Mike said, 2 analytical paragraphs at 4 and a counter argument to show balance and a conclusion. Now, you might have 2 or 3 points that you could include in each analytical paragraph. You only need 1 in each. So pick your strongest if you've got several to choose from. The ones that you can show, that you can explain in a chain of arguments. So using those connectives such as this means that, therefore, as a result, which in turn. As I've said, the conclusion should be fully justified. New evidence should be included, and it depends on factor, which is explained. Context, to get those marks for context, good quality context must be included in every paragraph that you write. And if you can do that, you will be hitting the top level of the mark scheme for 9 mark questions. So that concludes the session.
Fantastic. Loads of exam gold there on the 9 markers. So we've got 2 of those on Friday, Susan.
Yep,
2 9 markers.
So in Edexcel, there's one, so you've got a 9 and then a 12 mark question in section C. So you need to make sure you manage your time. So if you're AQA, I recommend 20 minutes on section A, and then after an hour, you're moving on to the last section. But Edexcel, 30-minute slots. So if you can get through section A quickly enough, that will leave you enough time to complete that 12 marker and that 9 marker that you'll see at the end of the paper. 2019, there were people who ran out of time, so you must make sure you get onto that last question.
And that good tip about the MCQs, I suppose if you have left some at the start to come back to, make sure you make a note somewhere to go back to them, because it's a free hit, isn't it? Even if you're guessing the answer.
Yeah. 25 or 20% chance of getting it right. So I would just guess as you go along and then go back to it if you've got time. So
I've got a question coming in, Susan, Mike, from Arthur, who's asking for an Edexcel specification in this case. How many minutes would you try to allocate to that all important 12 marker? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's for Edexcel, it's about a minute a mark. There's 90 marks in 90 minutes, but you've got to read the case studies as well. So if you can cut back on the time for section A, as I said, which has got 35 marks, if you can do that in 30 minutes, the last section is 25 marks. So that gives you that extra 5 minutes. So just to make sure you read the case study carefully. Sometimes students say they haven't got time to read the case study. We just had to get on with answering the questions. It's really important to take the time to read the case study, annotate it, and then you'll have enough time to answer that 12 marker. So 12 minutes, I would say.
There's been a couple of questions that have been coming through quite consistently, not specifically about the activities there. One was around, again, for Edexcel students, is paper 1 based only on theme 1 from the specification? And also the other question is people asking how many paragraphs you would normally expect to write for a 12 marker, obviously including, I guess, the conclusion or the evaluation. Any thoughts on that?
Well, for a 12 marker, you do exactly the same structure as a 9 marker. So
okay.
4 counter and a conclusion. The only difference with the 9 and 12 marker is that you get marks for knowledge and understanding. So you don't need to define at the start. You can do if you want to, but as long as you're showing knowledge and understanding throughout the way that you write in your answer, you'll get those marks. And what was the other question?
It was about theme 1 and paper 1, whether paper 1 is drawn from the advance notice on theme 1.
Yeah, it's theme 1, paper 1, and it's small businesses, new startups, or businesses that are based in the UK. So if you look at the different types of legal structure, sole traders, partnerships, private limited companies, and franchises, if you're an Edexcel student. If you are AQA, there's obviously it's slightly different.
Mike, you mentioned the Edexcel strands of analysis, and we've had a couple of questions coming in and saying, well, what's the best way of putting strands of analysis? I know you mentioned the connectives word there. Do you just want to maybe just a recap on the approach that you were explaining there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think using connectives, so using starting sentences with phrases that link to the previous sentence. So, for example, a consequence would be, or as a result, therefore, those kind of phrases show the examiner that you are linking your next sentence to the previous one. And if we're looking for 2 analytical paragraphs on those 9 and 12 mark questions, we're looking for 2 to 3 strands in each of those to get 5 overall. For Edexcel, as I said, Edexcel's prescriptive, that's 5. AQA is full analysis, but 2 to 3 strands in each paragraph is what we're aiming for.
And in total for Edexcel, a minimum of 5 over the total.
5.
The total
yes,
response.
that's right. And that's true for the 6, 9 and 12 mark questions. 5 strands.
So, yeah. And for AQA, I would probably put 3 in or 4. So I've seen a couple of people putting in about how you answer a 6 mark question.
Oh, yes. Yeah, please. Yeah, if you could pick that one up, Susan. Yeah.
So if you're AQA, it usually says in the question, analyse 1. So you just need 1 point, but full analysis, as Mike is saying. But because it's a lot of marks, just for 2 assessment objectives, application and analysis, I would include 4 strands, possibly 5, dependent if you can get another one out of it. But the key is to include context all the way through. So if you just include analysis and there's no context, the maximum number of marks you'll get is 3 out of 6. If you're Edexcel, you can include 1 point or 2 points, but you must have the 5 strands across those 1 or 2 points. So if you choose 1, 5 strands, 5 connectives. If you choose 2 points, you can have a split of 1, 4, 3, 2 in terms of those number of strands.
And Mike, you were mentioning the importance of application there, particularly when you were going through that on balance activity. I suppose that It's often said, isn't it, by examiners, that that's the difference between students, that most students can actually analyse quite well, but it's the students who make the full use of the extract of the case study that often find that their marks are particularly high.
I agree completely. It's the real skill and the best answers are the ones that combine the application and analysis. So they're building a chain of analysis that's in context, that's making use of that case study, rather than, as some students do, telling a story, describing what's happened in the case study, thinking that that's applicational, just using the business name is not. It's using specific elements from that extract and using that to answer the question, to build those interconnected strands. Absolutely.
Yeah. Any thoughts on application, Susan, or any other questions you've seen before we've got a minute or two before we wrap up? This has been a fantastic session, by the way. So
I've just seen something about, it's gone now, about graphs and charts.
Oh yes, Arto was asking. He said it was his final question. It was about what kind of questions there might be on graphs and charts based on the advanced information. Here it comes again. Arto's repeated it for us there.
So just in terms of, it's exactly what we've been doing in terms of the quantitative skills questions that Mike went through. So just taking information from a table, you possibly be asked to do a calculation. But if it's part of a case study, if there is a table or graph, then just don't ignore it. Make sure that's good quality context that you could include in possibly a 6 or 9 mark question to support your analysis. So every piece of information is there for a reason. So look at the information, look at the axes, look at the title of the graph, or look, as Mike was saying, about the values at the top of the table headings to make sure you're working in the correct figures, and then incorporate that. You might be able to do a calculation. So in paper 2, it might be gross profit margin or net profit margin or something like that. So just be guided by what the information that is there, really.
Yes, we are looking to do a paper 2 session, which I guess paper 2 is after half term, isn't it? So we'll have something lined up, I guess.
Can I jump in there?
Go for it, Mike. Yeah. Have you seen something?
Noticing Mike Litt, who's desperate, I think, for us to say his name. How many strands in a 9-mark conclusion? I think there may be some confusion there. The interconnected strands are coming in the 2 analytical paragraphs. When you get to the conclusion, you're looking for that AGIM structure or AGIM structure that Susan talked through, answering the question, justifying, it depends on, and most important point. So
you mentioned his name, so that's two answers for the price of one. Superb stuff. Well, look, I know we say on behalf of Susan and Mike and myself and Graham and all the team, Michelle and all the team who've been helping out with our grade boost, our GCSE Business Grade Booster cinema workshops and the online course and everything else that they're doing on Instagram, GCSE Business, daily GCSE Business questions. We wish you all the best on Friday. We'll be keeping our fingers crossed for you, and we'll be around to help you prepare for paper 2. We'll hope it goes well. Don't forget to answer the question, keep to time, use the case studies, show your workings for your calculations, and everything else that Susan and Mike have mentioned in this and previous revision blasts. If you're looking for a little bit of extra help on revision, why not go to our archive? Mike and Susan and Pete and Graham have done loads of revision blasts over the last few months, including lots just based on the advanced information. So that's not a bad way to spend half an hour if you just want to sort of keep topping up your revision. Particularly, I think we've got lots of quantitative skills questions in there, haven't we? Break even, all that kind of stuff. So make use of those at tutor2u.net/live. Go to the archive section and enjoy. If you found it useful, as always, we ask you to give us a thumbs up on YouTube. And right, from all 3 of us, all the best. And we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.